My name is Hannah Rivers, and I was 44 years old the day I discovered that my husband had hidden a secret from me throughout our marriage. A secret that repeated itself every single year for 15 years. The problem wasn't just that he had lied to me. The problem was that he was already dead, and I could no longer ask him for answers. It all began in the small mountain town of Silver Crest, Colorado. A quiet town, snow-covered peaks, narrow winding roads, and people who knew each other by name. I owned the local bookstore. My husband, Adam Rivers, was a science teacher at the local school. We had been married for 20 years, and if anyone had asked me whether there were any secrets between us, I would have said no without even thinking. Then last January, Adam died. A simple car accident. At least that was what I had been told. After that, life slowly started returning to normal. The pain hadn't gone away, but I was learning how to live with it. Then one day, everything changed. I was cleaning out the attic, old boxes, old books, old photographs, and that was when I found a small wooden box. I had never seen it before. There was no lock on it. I opened it. Inside was only one thing, an old diary, dark blue. I opened the first page and immediately recognized Adam's handwriting. I smiled. Maybe it was his personal journal. Maybe it contained memories. But then my eyes landed on the very first sentence written inside, and my smile disappeared because it said, "If this diary has reached Hannah, it means I never managed to tell her the truth." My breath caught in my throat. I read the sentence again, then again, but the words didn't change. The truth. What truth? I started reading faster. The first few pages were ordinary. Notes about school, notes about the weather, notes about family. Then suddenly, one date started appearing over and over again. October 14th, every year, without fail, for 15 years, and every single time only one sentence was written beneath it. When again today? I froze. When again today? Went where? I flipped through the remaining pages, but every year it was the same thing. October 14th, when again today. October 14th, when again today. October 14th, when again today. A chill ran down my spine, because I understood one thing immediately. Every year on October 14th, Adam disappeared from home. For the entire day, and he always said it was some school training, or a conference, or a meeting. I never questioned it, not once, but now. Now I had 15 years of the exact same pattern sitting right in front of me, and the most frightening part was still to come. Near the end of the diary, a folded piece of paper had been tucked between the pages. I pulled it out, opened it, and in the next second, the ground seemed to disappear beneath my feet. Because it was a map of a location deep in the mountains, nearly 100 miles from Silver Crest, and someone had drawn a red circle around a specific spot. Beneath the circle were only 3 words. It started there. My hands began to tremble. Started what? Why did Adam go there every year? And most importantly, why had he hidden all of this from me? I stared at the map for several long minutes. Then for the first time, I realized something. The man I had spent 20 years of my life with might not have been the man I thought I knew at all, and in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for the next October 14th. I was going to that place, and I was going to find out what it was that my husband had kept returning to every single year for 15 years. The next morning, I woke up very early. I hadn't slept all night. My eyes kept drifting back to the map. It started there. Just 3 words, but those 3 words had raised questions about my entire life. I placed the map inside my bag, closed the bookstore for 2 days, and called my daughter Lily. Lily was in college in Denver. I didn't want to tell her everything, not yet, so I simply told her that I needed to leave town for some personal business. Then I got into my car and headed toward the mountains. According to the map, the location was about 100 miles from Silver Crest. The road gradually became narrower. Then the paved road ended, and after that, only a dirt trail remained. There was nothing around except forest, tall trees, rocky slopes, and deep silence. About 3 hours later, I arrived at the location, and in the very next second, my breath caught in my throat. Because there was nothing there. No house, No cabin, no building, only an old cemetery. I stepped out of the car and slowly walked inside. The cemetery was very old. Some graves had dates that were more than 100 years old. Some names had completely faded away. And then my eyes drifted toward the very back section. There was a single grave there, separated from all the others, as if someone had intentionally placed it far away from everyone else. I walked toward it, and the name I read sent a chill through my body, because engraved on the gravestone were the words, Emily Rivers. Born 1987. Died 2009. I froze. Rivers, our last name, Adam's last name. My hands began to tremble. I read it again, then a third time, but the name didn't change. Emily Rivers. I had never heard that name in my entire life, not once. Then my eyes landed on something resting at the base of the grave, a small blue stone, and beneath it was a fresh flower. I went completely still, because the flower was new, maybe 1 or 2 days old, which could only mean one thing. Someone still came here, regularly. I looked around. The forest was silent, but suddenly I realized I wasn't alone. Someone was watching me. I immediately turned around, and in the distance, standing among the trees, was an old man. White beard, heavy jacket, around 70 years old. He was looking directly at me. I stood there for several seconds, then I started walking toward him. He didn't run, he didn't hide. He simply waited. When I got close enough, he asked, "You're Hannah, aren't you?" My breath stopped. "You know my name?" He slowly nodded. "Yes." "How?" Several seconds of silence passed. Then he glanced toward the grave and said, "Because Adam always said that one day you would come here." My hands turned cold. "You knew Adam?" "For 20 years. I froze. 20 years. The same length of time as our marriage. I managed to ask, "Who was Emily?" The old man's face suddenly filled with sadness. Deep sadness. Then he took a long breath and said, "She was his daughter." My entire world seemed to stop. "What?" That was all that came out of my mouth. "No." I shook my head. "No, that's impossible." But the old man said nothing, because perhaps he already knew that my life would never be the same again. And then he said something else, something that made the ground disappear beneath my feet. He said, "And Adam blamed himself for Emily's death." A silence as deep as a closed room spread through the forest, and for the first time I realized I hadn't stumbled onto a secret. I had stepped into a regret so powerful that it had forced my husband to return to the same place every single year for 15 years. He was her daughter. I stared at the old man for several seconds. I thought maybe I had heard him wrong, but there was no doubt on his face, no hesitation. He was telling the truth, or at least, he believed it was the truth. I managed to ask, "What's your name?" "Sam," he replied. "Sam Carter." I nodded. Then I asked again, "Adam's daughter?" My voice was trembling. "What exactly are you saying?" Sam looked toward the grave, then quietly said, "Emily wasn't his biological daughter." My breathing became a little steadier, but only for a moment, because Sam continued, "But he loved her more than anything in the world." I remained silent. Sam took a long breath, then slowly began telling the story. 17 years ago, Adam came here as a volunteer. There was an outdoor education program in the mountains for children. I listened quietly. That's where he met Emily. She was 12 years old, very smart, very stubborn, and she dreamed of seeing the whole world. Sam's eyes filled with tears, as though he still missed her too. Then he said, "She didn't have parents. She lived with her grandfather." A strange ache settled in my chest. I asked, "And then?" Sam was silent for several seconds. Then he said, "Adam became part of her life. Like a teacher. Like a mentor. And slowly, he paused. Like family." I looked toward Emily's grave, and for the first time, I could see a real person behind that name. Then I asked, "How did she die?" Sam's expression changed, completely, as if he didn't like that question, as if he didn't want to answer it, but eventually he said, "There was an accident in the mountains." My hands turned cold. "What kind of accident?" Sam didn't answer directly. Instead, he pulled an old photograph from his pocket and handed it to me. I took the photograph, and in the next second, my breath caught in my throat. Because Adam was in the picture, much younger, smiling, and standing beside him was a little girl, wearing a red jacket, laughing. That was Emily. I was seeing her for the first time, but the happiness on her face seemed to reach beyond the photograph itself. There was something written on the back. I turned it over and read it. "First climb. I did it. Emily." My eyes filled with tears. Then I handed the photograph back and asked, "What happened during the accident?" Sam looked toward the forest for a very long time, then finally said, "Emily wasn't alone that day." My heart started pounding. "Who was with her?" Sam answered. "Adam." A chill ran through my body. And he was the last person who saw her alive. The forest suddenly felt unnaturally quiet, as if even the wind had stopped moving. I managed to ask, "Did people blame him?" Sam shook his head. "No." I frowned. "Then why did he blame himself?" This time the answer took a while, a long while. Then Sam looked directly into my eyes and said, "Because it wasn't an accident." My breath stopped. "What?" Sam's voice became quieter. "At least, Adam believed it wasn't." I couldn't make sense of it, but then he said something that changed the entire story. Adam always believed Emily was calling for help. And he never heard her. My hands began to tremble. Sam continued, "For 15 years he came here every October 14th. Because he was convinced that if he had turned around just 1 minute earlier that day," he paused, his eyes became wet, "Emily would still be alive today." I found myself staring at the grave. For the first time, I finally understood. This wasn't a mystery. It was guilt. Terrible, unbreakable, 15-year-old guilt. But then my eyes landed on a small metal marker attached behind the gravestone, and in the next second, my heart sank, because a date was engraved on it. October 14th, 2009, and beneath it were only 2 words, "Found 2012. I froze. Found 2012? But the date of death above was 2009. I immediately turned toward Sam and whispered, "If Emily died in 2009? My voice was shaking. Then why was she found in 2012? Sam's face went completely pale, and in that moment I realized the biggest truth in the entire story still hadn't come out yet. If Emily died in 2009, then why was she found in 2012? My voice echoed through the silence of the forest. Sam's face had gone completely pale. He didn't say anything for several seconds. Then he slowly looked toward the grave and said, "Because for 3 years, nobody knew where she was." My breath stopped completely. "What?" I whispered. Sam took a long breath. "That day, Emily disappeared in the mountains, and nobody could find her." My hands began to tremble. "For 3 years?" "Yes." The forest suddenly felt colder than before. I asked, "So what happened then?" Sam was silent for a moment. Then he said, "A statewide search operation was launched. Volunteers came, helicopters came, the police came, but nothing was found." I kept listening. Then slowly people gave up hope, except for one man. I already knew the answer. "Adam." Sam nodded. "Yes." His voice grew heavy. "He came back every month, then every week, then almost every day." My eyes filled with tears, because at that moment I remembered Adam. He always became different around October, quiet, sad, distant, and I used to think it was work-related stress. But now everything looked different. Sam continued. "In 2012, a hunter finally found something. I quietly asked, 'What?' A red jacket. A chill ran through my body. The same red jacket, the one I had seen in the photograph. Sam said, then they found the rest. And the case was closed. I looked toward the grave, and for the first time I realized how much history was buried beneath that small patch of ground. But then a question entered my mind. A very important question. I immediately asked, if the case was closed, then why did Adam keep coming here for 15 years? Sam fell silent for a long time. Then he said, because he never believed the official story. My hands turned cold. What official story? Sam looked at me and said that Emily got lost. I frowned. Then what did Adam believe? Before answering, Sam looked around, as if someone might be listening. Then, in a very quiet voice, he said, he believed Emily wasn't alone. My breath caught in my throat. What? And he believed someone hid the truth. The forest fell silent again. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Then I asked, who? Sam shook his head. I don't know. But Adam had his suspicions. About who? Sam was just about to answer when suddenly his eyes shifted behind me, and his expression changed completely. I immediately turned around, and in the next second a chill ran down my spine, because standing at the entrance of the cemetery was a woman, around 40 years old, black hair, a dark blue jacket, and she was looking directly at us. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then she slowly started walking toward us. Sam's face became even paler. I whispered, do you know her? Sam barely nodded. Yes. Who is she? He answered, and his words made the ground disappear beneath my feet. That's Catherine Hughes. I didn't understand. So? Sam's voice was trembling. She was the last person on that mountain with Emily that day. My breath stopped, because if that was true, then the most important witness to the story I had been trying to understand for 15 years was walking directly toward me, Catherine Hughes. The moment I heard the name, a strange sense of unease settled inside me. She was slowly walking toward us. There was no fear on her face, no nervousness, as if she already knew I would come here. Sam went completely silent. It was the first time I had seen him look so uncomfortable. A few seconds later, Catherine stopped in front of us. She looked at me first, then at Emily's grave, and finally at Sam. So she finally came, she said in a calm voice. My breath caught in my throat. You know me? Catherine gave a faint smile. I've been hearing about you for 15 years. A chill ran through my body. 15 years, that number again, the same amount of time. I asked, you were there that day? Her smile disappeared, then she slowly nodded. Yes. The forest suddenly became even quieter. I could feel my heart pounding, because for the first time I was standing in front of someone who had actually been there. The day everything changed, I asked directly, what happened? Catherine didn't answer right away. For several seconds, she stared at the grave. Then she said, do you want the truth? Yes. The whole truth? Yes. She took a long breath and said, then first you need to know that Adam didn't lie to you. I froze. What do you mean? Catherine said, he truly considered Emily his daughter. I remained silent. That much I understood now, but that wasn't the biggest question. I asked again, what happened that day? This time, Catherine's eyes filled with tears, very slowly. Then she said, there were 4 of us. My hands turned cold. 4? Sam immediately looked at her. It was obvious he didn't know this part. Catherine said, me, Emily, Adam. She paused, then said, and a 4th person. My breath stopped because Adam's diary had never mentioned a 4th person, not once. I asked, who? Catherine fell silent for a long time. Then she said, that's the name Adam spent his entire life trying to prove. My heart started racing. What name? Catherine didn't answer. She reached into the pocket of her jacket and pulled out an old photograph, very old. The edges had turned yellow. She handed it to me. I took it, and in the next second my breath caught in my throat. because there were 4 people standing in the picture: Adam, Emily, Catherine, and a man, someone I had never seen before. But the strangest thing was something else. The man's face had been crossed out with a black marker, completely, deliberately. I stared at the photograph, then asked, "Who did that?" Catherine's eyes suddenly hardened. "Adam." I froze. "What?" She nodded. "He destroyed every photograph of this man." A chill ran through my body. "Why?" Several seconds of silence passed. Then Catherine said, "Because he believed Emily died because of him." The wind began moving through the forest. The branches of the trees swayed, but the only words echoing in my ears were, "because of him." I gripped the photograph tightly, then asked, "Is that man still alive today?" Catherine looked directly into my eyes, and the answer she gave made the ground disappear beneath my feet. "Yes." I went completely still, because suddenly this story was no longer about the past. That man was still somewhere out there, still alive, and maybe he didn't even know that 15 years later, someone had started searching for the truth about that day again. But the biggest shock was still waiting, because in the very next moment, Catherine said, "And Hannah." I looked at her. Her voice was trembling. Adam's fatal accident may not have been an accident. The entire forest fell silent, and in that moment I realized the secret I had been chasing wasn't just Emily's story. Maybe Adam's death was part of the same story too. Adam's fatal accident may not have been an accident. The photograph almost slipped from my hands. I stared at Catherine for several seconds. For a moment I thought I had heard her wrong, but there was no trace of a joke on her face, only seriousness and fear. I managed to ask, "What are you saying?" Catherine took a long breath, then said, "I'm not saying someone killed Adam. But I also don't believe what happened was just a simple accident." My heartbeat quickened. "Why?" Catherine remained silent for a moment, then said, "Because 3 days before he died, he called me." I froze. "What?" Even Sam looked shocked. It was obvious he was hearing this for the first time as well. Catherine said, "We barely spoke during those 15 years. But that week, he suddenly called me and said he had finally found something." My breath caught in my throat. What had he found? Evidence. Silence filled the forest. I could feel my fingers trembling. "Evidence of what?" Catherine said quietly. "About the 4th man." A chill ran through my body. That same man, the one whose face had been cut out of every photograph, the same man Adam blamed. I asked, "Did Adam tell you his name?" Catherine shook her head. "No. He only said that now he was certain, and that he could prove everything." My hands turned cold, because another thing was becoming clear. If Adam had gotten very close to the truth, then dying in an accident just a few days later was, at the very least, strange. Suddenly Sam spoke. "What happened after the phone call?" Catherine's face became sad. "He said he was going to meet me, but we never met. Because before that," she paused, "he died." The 3 of us fell silent. For a while, the only sound was the wind moving through the trees. Then my eyes drifted back to Emily's grave. And suddenly I remembered something. The diary. I opened my bag, pulled out the diary, and began searching for the page with the final entry. A few seconds later, I found it. I started reading. And suddenly, my breath stopped, because earlier I hadn't paid attention to one particular line. The final entry said, "If I'm right, then she deserves to know the truth too." I froze. She, who? I read the entire page again, and then noticed another line below it, written very lightly, as if it had been scribbled in a hurry. "I won't hide it anymore." My hands started shaking. I asked quietly, "Did Emily have any family left?" Catherine and Sam looked at each other. Then Catherine answered, "Yes." My heart skipped a beat. "Who?" Several seconds of silence passed. Then she said, A younger sister. I went completely still. What? Catherine nodded. Emily had a younger sister, but she was very young when all of this happened. My mind started racing. Adam's diary. She deserves to know the truth. A younger sister. Everything was suddenly starting to connect, but something was still missing. I asked, where is she now? Catherine's expression changed in a strange way. Then she said quietly, that's the reason I came here. My breath stopped. What do you mean? Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Then she looked directly at me and said, because last week, that girl came looking for me. The forest fell silent again. I managed to ask, which girl? Catherine answered, Emily's sister. Before I could say anything, she spoke again. And this time, my entire world shook. And she has the last package Adam ever sent. My breath caught in my throat, because if that was true, then maybe Adam had tried to tell someone the truth before he died, and that truth was still somewhere out there. And she has the last package Adam ever sent. My breath caught in my throat. For several seconds, I just stared at Catherine. Then I managed to ask, where is she? Catherine answered, in Silver Crest. My heart started pounding. For all those years, Adam had been chasing a mystery, and now, suddenly, it felt like every answer was gathering in one place. I immediately said, I need to meet her. Catherine nodded. I knew you'd say that. Then she pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. An address was written on it, on the outskirts of Silver Crest. I took the paper, and for the first time, I felt like I was very close to the truth. That evening, I returned to town. The entire drive, only one thought kept circling through my mind. Adam's final package. What was inside it? And why had he sent it to that girl instead of me? The next morning, I arrived at the address. It was a small house. Simple, quiet. Flower pots sat outside the front door. I rang the bell. A few seconds later, the door opened, and a young woman was standing there. About 25 years old, brown hair, calm eyes, and the same confusion on her face that was probably on mine. She asked softly, Hannah. My breath caught. You know me? She nodded. Adam wrote a lot about you. My hands turned cold. For a moment, I couldn't say anything. Then she said, please come in. We sat in the living room. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she placed an old box on the table, wooden, dark brown. The moment I saw it, I recognized it. It belonged to Adam. I had seen it in our house years ago. Then one day, it had suddenly disappeared. The young woman said quietly, this package arrived 2 days after he died. My heartbeat quickened. Did you open it? She shook her head. No. Why? Her eyes filled with tears. Because it said it had to be opened with you. My breath caught again. I looked at the top of the box, and sure enough, in Adam's handwriting were the words, for Hannah and Ava. Ava, that was probably her name. I looked at her. You're Ava. She nodded. Yes. Emily's sister? Her eyes filled with tears. Yes. Silence filled the room. Then we slowly opened the box. There were many things inside. Old photographs, letters, several pages from a diary, and at the very bottom, a sealed envelope. Written across it were the words, if you're reading this, Hannah, then I waited far too long to tell the truth. My hands began trembling. I opened the envelope and started reading. Hannah, I never wanted to lie to you, but every year I told myself I would explain everything the next year. Then the next year came, and I became afraid again. My eyes filled with tears. The letter continued. I couldn't save Emily, but that wasn't my greatest mistake. I froze. Then I read the next line, and my heart sank. My greatest mistake was leaving Ava alone. My hands trembled. Ava sat silently listening. The letter continued. For 15 years, I searched for the truth about Emily, but gradually I realized I was asking the wrong question. I shouldn't have been asking what happened to Emily. I should have been asking what happened to Ava. Silence filled the room. Tears streamed down my face. Then I reached the final page, and the words written there changed my entire world. If I'm right, then Ava never learned that a trust fund was left for her. And if that fund is missing, then it means the fourth man wasn't only involved in Emily's story. My breath caught. The moment I read the final line of the letter, the entire room seemed to freeze, because Adam had written, "And if anything happens to me, look for that man's name in Sheriff Michael Grant's old case file." I went completely still, because Silver Crest's Sheriff Michael Grant had died 10 years ago, and all of his files had been stored inside the town's old abandoned records building, which meant Adam's final clue was still waiting for us. And for the first time, I felt that the end of a 15-year-old story might finally be very close. The next morning, Ava and I arrived at Silver Crest's old records building. The building had been closed for years, covered in dust, broken windows, and rows of old wooden filing cabinets. If Adam had been right, then all of our answers were hidden somewhere inside. The building's caretaker allowed us to enter, and we made our way to the room that contained Sheriff Michael Grant's old files. Hundreds of files, thousands of documents, but we only needed one name: Emily. For nearly 3 hours we searched. Then suddenly Ava called out, "Hannah!" I rushed over to her. She was holding an old brown file. Dust covered the surface, and written across the front were the words, "Case October 14th, 2009. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. We opened the file. The first few pages were ordinary: search reports, witness statements, maps. But then in the middle, we found an envelope, marked with a red stamp. Unfiled evidence that had never officially been added to the case. My hands began trembling. I opened the envelope, and inside was an old audio recording, along with a handwritten note from Sheriff Grant. I read the note, and my breath stopped because it said, "This recording was recovered 2 days after the incident. Due to insufficient evidence, it was not included in the official case file." Ava and I looked at each other. Then we played the recording. Static filled the room. For several seconds, all we could hear was wind. Then a girl's voice appeared. "Emily." My hands turned cold. She was laughing, as if she were recording something during a hike. Then suddenly another voice could be heard. A man's voice. The fourth man. The same man whose face had been removed from the photographs. Silence filled the room. Then an argument began in the recording. The voices grew louder, and then Emily's voice shouted, "Give Ava her money back." I froze. So did Ava, because for the first time, everything started fitting together. The trust fund, the missing money, the fourth man. Then the man shouted, "You don't know anything." After that came the sound of strong wind, a scream, and the recording suddenly ended. The room went completely silent. Tears streamed down Ava's face. I took her hand. Then we continued reading the file, and finally the man's identity was revealed. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a stranger. He was Ava and Emily's legal guardian, the man their family had trusted, and the man who had transferred Ava's trust fund into his own name. Emily had discovered the truth, and on that day in the mountains, she had confronted him. But the biggest shock was still waiting, because on the last page of the file was a handwritten note from Sheriff Grant. Adam Rivers is innocent. He blamed himself for 15 years. But the available evidence indicates that Emily did not die trying to save him. She died protecting her sister's future. Tears filled my eyes, because at last, the truth had come out, the whole truth. Adam wasn't guilty. He had only believed he was. For 15 years, every year, every October 14th, he didn't visit that grave because he had lost Emily. He visited because he was keeping a promise he had made to her. A promise that Ava would never be left alone. And suddenly I understood why he had sent that package to Ava, because he wanted her, one day, to get her truth back. A few months later, the case was officially reopened. The records connected to the trust fund came to light, and Ava finally recovered what legally belonged to her. But for her, the money wasn't the most important thing. She had found the truth about her sister, and I had found the truth about my husband. On a spring morning, I returned to the cemetery one last time. I stood in front of Emily's grave. Then I gently ran my hand across a small stone placed beside it. New words had been engraved there. She protected her sister. The wind moved softly through the trees. The mountains stood silent, and for the first time I felt that a 15-year-old story had finally come to an end. I looked up at the sky and smiled, because now I knew the truth. Adam had hidden a secret from me, but it wasn't a secret of betrayal, it was a secret of a promise he kept until his very last breath. If you've made it this far in the story, be sure to leave your name in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. We'll see you again soon with a new story. Goodbye.